Welcome to another video. In this video I'm going to put back the suspension on the rear of the Elan. As you can see, I've added all of the suspension arms that have been powder coated after they were acid stripped. I've not done anything about the bolts, but I will eventually replace them, just one step at a time. The suspension arm, I've give it a coating of rust-proof paint, but it's just something for it to look a little bit nicer than looking like rust. It really doesn't mean much because I will eventually replace everything. The first thing that I actually need to do is to put brand new bushings all around. So I need to first of all remove the metal rings of the old bushings from the wishbone, and thankfully I've removed them already from the other suspension arms. So just putting bushings on this, I will record that in fast forward and probably cut some parts of it obviously, but I'll get started with that, put bushings on everything, and then I'll put everything back together in the car, and we'll see how it goes. And here we have another fast forward motion. So what I've started with was to put the little bushings on the droplinks. I've got footage on this also when I did the front suspension, because the droplinks are the same. Then I moved on to work on the top link body. This was powder coated, particularly on the inside of the bushings. So I had to remove that coating somehow. What I've done to achieve that was to actually crack the powder coating using a screwdriver, and that removed like the thicker part of it. And then after I had a few incisions onto it, I could use 60 grit sandpaper, and using the sandpaper I took off all of it, and then finally I just used the Dremel using a brass wire brush in order to remove any bits that were remaining. So it was all and it all ended up being rather polished at the end. As far as fitting them in after the coating was out, it's not really a big problem if you have a big vise. You just have to align things and then push them together, press them together with a vise, and use a few sockets to make sure that it goes through all the way. After the droplink body bushing was fitted, I did the same process for the droplink end piece. It's exactly the same type of bushing, it's exactly the same process, so nothing really eventful here to see. After this was done, I moved on to the wishbone. This was more time consuming because I did not remove the previous bushing sleeves before powder coating. The sleeves were extremely tight, and since I already had the wishbone powder coated, I didn't have the option of using a torch to loosen them up with heat. The approach that worked for me to remove these was to use a hacksaw and make a cut onto the sleeve metal in order to allow it to curl on itself to reduce the pressure and then slide them out. This has to be done extremely carefully, because I don't want to cut into the wishbone metal itself. The process itself is simple. My biggest struggle was to find a way to get hold of the wishbone in the vise without crushing its hollow metal structure. As you can see from the footage, I tried to use different shapes of plywood to actually grab a hold of the wishbone. This was done extremely carefully, and you can see from the footage that it took quite a long time. Because what I didn't want to cut into the metal of the wishbone, I just wanted to cut the sleeve. So what I had to do is make a ridge and keep on trying to prise it off and see if the metal would come out, and then cut a little bit more and cut a little bit more. So a repetitive process that was very, very time consuming, and in the end I actually scratched a little bit of the wishbone metal. Okay, so I've removed the old bushings metal, the sleeves of the bushings. So now that this is ready for the new bushings, I still need to just get a bit of this rust out of this back seat, and we'll be doing that in a second. Just gonna clean this too, and then we'll be back. Okay, so here we are. I've done a bit of cleaning here. Just removing that rust, and let's get started with the bushings. It's been quite a few hours now. There are two different types of bushings. There's these bigger ones, which go here, and the smaller ones go over there. So I'm just gonna get started with this. It's If you've seen the video on the front ones, it's just the same thing. Just bushing on the left, slide it in, bushing on the right, slide it in, and then push the sleeve in. The way that I've done this before was with my big C-clamp. Just open it up and push. Very, very straightforward. So we only need to do a little bit more. I'm gonna do this one close to the camera, and then do the opposite side close to the camera. Again, same design, 2 halves, 1 sleeve in the middle, half slot in, then the sleeve goes in, which adds a bit of pressure to the whole thing. That one done. So that is the final set of bushings, and now I have to fit this in the car. Okay, so now that all the bushings are fitted, all I have to do is set up the camera onto another time lapse, and off we go. The first thing I've done was to fit the inner side of the wishbone with the 2 M12 bolts. I over-tightened this, which later on, in order to install the hub, I had to readjust. Then I bolted the drop link to the chassis and the anti-roll bar, and following that, I fitted the brake hose and clipped it to the wishbone. Then I moved on to install the top link. The side that fits in the chassis is a little awkward to install because ideally it would be a 2-person job. You'd have one person holding onto the drop link as well as the bracket that connects to the wishbone, and the second person would be aligning the M12 bolt from inside of the boot. This is doable alone, it's just that it was a little bit more fiddly. After that, I attached the bottom of the spring and dampler assembly to the wishbone using an M12 bolt, and moved on to attach the anti-roll bar to the wishbone, which I've then recorded again on the opposite side to better demonstrate the procedure. The next thing was to attach the top link end to the top link body with a small adjusting bolt, and then I installed the brand new brake pipes, which I will put the process of fabricating these in a different video. It's been a few days, and I've lost the sleeve that goes in there. There's supposed to be a sleeve between this half of the bolt and the bushing from the top link, and no idea what happened to it. I thought I had it when I first started to do this corner of the car. A sleeve actually fell while I was working, and closed my eyes, never to see it again. No idea if I lost the sleeve when I disassembled the car or if I lost it that day, but I've looked everywhere in the garage and it's just gone. So I had to buy a replacement one. The problem is that they don't have the same bushing anymore. So this is supposed to be a bushing that is 37 millimeters long, and it was replaced in later versions with one which is 40. So you had a 37 plus another 37 before, and then in later versions you have one which is 40. Now this is okay, this can fix me this problem at the moment. The problem is that for the opposite side, the inner side of the top link, actually you must have a 37 millimeter. Anyway, I have two options as of right now. I can grab this one, find someone that has a lathe and cut it in half effectively, or I can try to remove the 37 millimeter bushing in here shove the 40mm in here, and then I will have a spare 37mm. I'm gonna give that a go, see if I can remove this, which feels a bit seized. If that doesn't work, I will have to get that cut, and I'll have to find someone with a lathe. So, let's just set up the time lapse and see how things go. What you see now is basically multiple attempts to remove the old sleeve. Initially, I was using a copper amber to make it move left and right, and that worked a tiny bit, but after that, removing it completely was a bit more challenging until I found a suitable socket to actually push it out. Even with the socket, it was still very challenging, but it did work eventually. Fitting the new sleeve was actually harder than removing the old sleeve. Even with the sleeve perfectly aligned and full of copper grease, it was pretty difficult to install it. I ended up having to heat up the top of the hub and press the sleeve using the vise while tapping it with a hammer to make it move in small increments while trying to readjust it to make sure it wasn't going misaligned. When I finally finished installing the sleeve onto the top of the hub, I was able to fit the hub in a car. One thing worth noting with this is that because I had the new sleeve at the top that was longer than the size of the hub, I had to actually start the installation from the top. So I had to slot the sleeve into the bushing from the top link, and after that I had to line up the bottom of the hub with the wishbone, which was harder than it looked. Well, it turns out I didn't have the camera recording while I was doing the final fitting. The big bolt is tricky to get aligned, particularly when this pivot has to be here because of the sleeve connecting the two, which is a bit annoying, but it's what we've got. So I had to kind of push it, wiggle, and it took me more than an hour to finally put it through, because the bolt and the sleeves from the new bushings are a very, very tight fit, so any kind of wiggle room that we do around everything makes it even harder. But after a bit of pushing and forcing things and wiggling bits, it's all in. So I guess that's the video for this. I guess that's the video for the suspension. I'm not going to do a video on the brakes or anything else. I'm just going to put this all back together. But yeah, hope that you enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas on how you can tackle this job. I'm giving you some ideas also of what struggles you may find based on my experience. And yeah, I hope I see you in the next one.